guys, welcome back to the Independent Investor Channel. In this video, I'm going to earmark what I feel are the best 2 stocks in the 11 sectors of the S&P 500. This would be really awesome for you guys to understand what I feel like are the very best in each of the sectors. It'll help you start to define a baseline for yourself and start to identify in order of precedence what investments you could pursue in each of the sectors. So I'm going to drop you into M1 Finance to do the review. Please enjoy. So for you guys that have been with me for a while, you guys know I like to use M1 Finance to communicate stock information. It's the easiest, most simplified way to communicate a lot of information in the easiest form. And I think for new investors, they do appreciate that level of transparency. So this video, I'm going to walk you through the top 2 stocks in each of the S&P 500 sectors. Now, the real takeaway in this lesson is for you guys to understand if you wanted to expand this out to your top 5 or your top 10, you could do that. All we're doing here is establishing a line of thinking in how we break down the 11 sectors of the S&P 500. And if we were going to cherry pick the sectors and pick the top 2 out of each one, which ones would you choose? Would they be different from mine? Would there be some similarities? And I think this list, when I was making it, was a lot easier than what I thought it was going to be. There was obviously some stocks that I had to leave off that I really do enjoy and I personally own myself. And then there was some stocks that I felt like needed to be included that I didn't own, especially in the materials sector. I don't own either one of these. I do own the materials ETF, but I don't own any of the 2 materials that I'll disclose to you in just a second. Also, what I did for you guys is I've provided this stock portfolio in the description below, and I've taken this 22 stock portfolio and I've broken it down across the 3 investor profiles. And this investor profile that we're going to look at is going to be for the aggressive investor. But I've also provided links for a conservative investor and for a moderate or midline investor, and then the aggressive investor. So you're going to see 3 separate links there, and you'll be interested to know how I've allocated, I'll talk about that in just a second, each of these 22 names. Now the 22 names didn't change, okay, based on the investor profile. But what I did change is the allocation to each name, and I'll explain that a little bit more once we get into the video, guys. So I'm going to scroll down here, and again, these links will be available, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm going to try to move as slow as I can and zoom in on these when I edit the video so you guys can really get some transparency. But starting with technology, right at the top, Apple and Microsoft, those are easy. And again, to reemphasize, when I was doing this list, it was super simple to go through here and identify the best in breed in each of the sectors. Apple and Microsoft, 2 companies that we talk about all the time. The next on the list was in the healthcare sector, and I chose J&J, ticker symbol J&J, and Pfizer. Those were the 2 based on pretty good entries right now. Healthcare did hold up fairly good during this recent downturn, but I think from a valuation perspective, J&J is predominantly always a buy. And then Pfizer here dipping back to the low 30s. They had one of their drugs that did not make it through phase 3 approval, and it hurt the stock a little bit, but a 4.5 times yielder, 12 times forward earnings on Pfizer, ticker symbol PFE, is noted here in healthcare. Next on the list is one of my favorite sectors. It's the regulated utility sector. This was also a very simple choose selection for me. You can see here together is Southern Company, ticker symbol SO, and ticker symbol DUK for Duke Energy Corp. This was just an easy selection for me. I do have some additional favorites, and for you guys that aren't individual stock pickers, you guys will be glad to know that I also own the VPU, which is Vanguard's Utilities ETF. It's a specialty ETF that just owns the regulated utilities, so kind of a fun way of getting exposure, and that goes for each of these sectors. If you can't get specific and pick the top 2 like I have done, and you have trouble doing that, and you don't feel comfortable entering into single stocks at this point, you can always just buy the sector or always go with a total market ETF like an S&P 500 index. But Duke and Southern Company. Next is financials. Financials was a tough one, actually, because financials can branch into a lot of different segments, okay? It can go into financing. It can go into financial product offerers like a BlackRock. It can go into insurers like a Travelers, which I've just recently bought, Goldman Sachs, which is a full service financial firm offering global services. But I stuck with more of the traditional large banking on the financials and went ahead and went with JP Morgan Chase, which I felt like was an easy pickup. But that second position I had a little bit of trouble with in financials, and I did opt for Bank of America. I think Bank of America really is still recovering from about 10 years ago when the banks were put through the stress test. And I think Bank of America has really emerged and is coming into its own. I'm a client of Bank of America's. I really do enjoy their products and where they're going. Tangible book is good on Bank of America, so that filled that secondary slot. We could have filled it with a number of different companies, Goldman Sachs, Travelers, BlackRock. I've named a few here, but Bank of America was the one where I felt like should definitely, and Citigroup, Wells Fargo I do like here, but they're still working through their issues. But Bank of America is what we settled on, and you can certainly agree to disagree with me on that. The fundamental lesson behind this isn't to agree or disagree with my picks. The lesson here is to understand how I break down the sectors and do so for yourself. You'll be a lot better off, okay? So next is industrials, one of my favorites. We've got 3M and we've got Caterpillar. This was an easy selection for me. I do own a lot of exposure in industrials. It's the heaviest weighting that I currently have in the portfolio, but it was easy to pick the top two in Caterpillar, CAT, and 3M, MMM in industrials. Next is consumer staples. This was also fairly easy in PepsiCo, ticker symbol PEP, as well as Procter & Gamble, one of those stocks that I feel like you can just buy and own forever. So Pepsi and Procter & Gamble there. Next is Telecom Services. That allows us to take Disney, which I do think is one of the top stocks to own forever. And then it was between AT&T and Verizon, and I opted for AT&T right here just because of some of the moves, some of the asset sales that they've just recently had. A little bit higher dividend than Verizon, and I felt like it was a little bit better entry of the stock price for AT&T. I do own both of them. I just opted to go ahead and name AT&T, so if any of you guys are watching this video trip and fall into any of these names, you'll be fine and the wiser for it, and probably more financially secure into your future if you do opt for these top tier companies. Next is discretionary. This was easy. I thought this was going to be a little tougher as well, but discretionary, two Dow components here in Home Depot and McDonald's. McDonald's ticker symbol MCD and Home Depot respectively. Can't say enough about these two awesome companies. These are cornerstones in my portfolio. I'll own them for decades. What else can I say? It's very simple. Investing doesn't have to be rocket science, guys. It's just selecting these great companies that we've known forever that have rewarded shareholders over the long term. Very, very simple. Next on the list is energy. Energy was also very simple. A lot of energy names I like right here, but Chevron and ExxonMobil, absolutely. The two big ones, XOM and CVX. In Chevron, certainly give the nod to Chevron right here. A little bit more safety surrounding their dividend, but ExxonMobil, definitely an attractive entry here in the company. Oil does have some headwinds, so you got to be careful in the energy patch, but the point of this video is to pick the top two out of the energy sector, and I believe that we've done so. Next on the list is real estate REITs. This sometimes is listed as a subsector of the financials, which makes it interesting. It is a standalone sector in the S&P 500. I've recently taken fairly new positions in both Realty Income Corp and WP Carey. Now, I did an in-depth portfolio look at some of these, and I was extremely impressed. It's amazing how long these folks keep clients under their envelope on their long-term lease program. I think both of these folks were averaging well over 10 years per lease. These folks are leasing to a lot of the established businesses that you would recognize on most of the street corners in rural and suburban areas. Very, very impressive set of portfolio holdings that these guys have, and they lease to the tenant and rake in the money and return a lot of the shareholder wealth back in the form of dividends. So I'm really enjoying a fairly large position for me in Realty Income, ticker symbol O. I own 100 shares of Realty Income, and then I own right now 50 shares of WP Carey. So wanted to pick the top two. I do like American Tower REIT, but I felt like to put my money where my mouth is, to name the two that I actually physically put my own money in. And finally was the toughest sector, and one that I really don't pay a whole lot of attention to be honest with you. I do own the materials, but I had to pick two for the sake of making this video. BHP Billiton, ticker symbol BBL. On valuation, certainly a multi-purpose player in the materials provider space. And then Linde, which is 2.2 dividend payer, rather expensive company, but the value is such in their recent pickup with Praxair. This company is really poised in position to provide some of their specialty chemical business, nitrogen, again through their acquisition, and just a very, very strong portfolio of product offerings in the material sector. So with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review of the top two picks in each of the sector. I'll kick you back to YouTube and we'll conclude the video. All right, guys, welcome back out of M1 Finance. I hope you appreciated this review. This is not something that you need to go out and buy right away. This is something that I felt like reviewing the sectors. These were representative of the very best number 1 and 2 stocks in the sector. I obviously had to leave some really good names out of this review, but that's for you to go in and deliberate and make right for yourself on what you feel are the top tier companies in the S&P 500, and it'll really help you start to break down information. This will be very valuable for those newer investors who don't know where to start. All right, and understanding that there's 11 sectors, and you can start to go through there and differentiate for yourself what type of investments could be attractive to you. Guys, if it's your first time to the channel, want to subscribe to the message here, leave your comments at the bottom of the video. I've left these portfolios for a conservative, a moderate, and an aggressive investor in the comments section of this video. I want to share the message with beginning investors out there, introduce them to the channel and the message that we're putting through. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the message, and good luck in your investment future.